Hello, this is History Shorts with the Artifactual Scholar. Today, I'll be talking about the Grand Tour. By the 17th and 18th centuries, it had become fashionable for wealthy young English gentlemen, and occasionally ladies, to make the Grand Tour of Europe. This trip, which could last for several years, was considered the final step in the young man's classical education and was to prepare him for participation in government and civic life in England. Most of these English tourists went to the continent to explore the ruins of classical antiquity, to study languages, and to experience culture and art. It was expected that this exposure to unfamiliar ideas would broaden the travelers' horizons, enlighten their minds, and make them productive members of the English upper class. In general, the tourists left England and made the sometimes risky voyage across the English Channel to Calais, France, and from there to Paris. Despite its culture and undeniable pleasures, Paris was usually not the final destination, but just a jumping-off point. Here, guides and tutors were hired, and arrangements were made for the rest of the trip. Most of the tourists wanted to visit Italy, which was widely considered the birthplace of Western civilization. As author and critic Samuel Johnson once noted, "A man who has not been in Italy is always conscious of an inferiority." So from Paris, the travelers and their guides headed south, crossing the Alps and arriving on the Italian peninsula. The primary destination in Italy was Rome. Despite the Renaissance and Baroque building boom that had transformed portions of the city, the remnants of ancient Rome, at one time the center of empire, had fallen into picturesque decay. The tourists were drawn by this legacy of imperial grandeur and explored the ruins of the Roman Forum and the Colosseum. After the 1730s, some of the more adventurous travelers headed south to Naples to visit the recently discovered ruins of Pompeii and Herculaneum. From Rome, the tourists generally headed to Florence, the birthplace of the Renaissance. Then they traveled to the colorful, culturally exotic city of Venice. As they traveled, the tourists were expected to study the lessons of antiquity and be moved by the sights they visited. Some, like Lord Byron, were left in awe of Italy. Others, however, saw the opportunity to take advantage of the somewhat less restrictive morality of the continent to pursue other pleasures. All invariably brought back souvenirs. By the mid-18th century, other Northern Europeans, particularly Germans, followed the British example and participated in the Grand Tour. The German poet Johann Wolfgang Goethe was famously mesmerized and intoxicated by his experiences in Italy. And during the 19th and early 20th centuries, Americans would begin trekking to Europe to take the Grand Tour. One of the greatest cultural legacies of the Grand Tour was a reimagining of art and architecture in England and Northern Europe. The tourists brought back home a new sense of style and elegance that was shaped by experiences in the ruins of Rome and that eventually developed into the neoclassicism of the 18th century. As the British author Fanny Burney wrote, "Traveling is the ruin of all happiness. There's no looking at a building here after seeing Italy." This has been History Shorts. Thanks for watching.